Hello and welcome to another episode of Life Telos as First Principle. Today I want to talk about one of humanity's most powerful symbolic inventions, time, as measured by the clock and calendar. The concept of time has made it possible for us to build complex societies, collaborate across continents, and plan for the future. But the clock and the calendar have also pulled us out of sync with the biological rhythms that have governed life for millions of years. I'm going to talk about how the clock and calendar time have made civilization and its greatness possible. But I will also talk about how conforming our lives to the clock clashes with biological time and how this has consequences for our health and well-being. Later, I'll also explore how we can honor the brilliance of human timekeeping while staying rooted in life's natural rhythms. But first, let's take a brief look at the history of human timekeeping. Before we invented mechanical clocks, we were already skilled timekeepers, just using different scales of time. Ancient civilizations developed remarkably precise calendars to track the rhythms of the cosmos. Ancient Egyptians devised a 365-day solar calendar to predict the flooding of the Nile. Babylonians maintained complex lunar solar calendars thousands of years ago. The Mayan civilization created calendars capable of tracking cycles spanning thousands of years. The Julian calendar in 45 BCE and later the Gregorian calendar in 1582 refined our measurement of the solar year to astonishing accuracy. While calendars measured long timescales, life within a single day was often organized more loosely by sunrise, sunset, or bells tolling in churches. But that changed dramatically in medieval Europe. Mechanical clocks emerged in the 13th and 14th centuries. They began with simple hourly chimes in monasteries and town squares. Over time, they evolved into precision instruments tracking hours, minutes, and eventually seconds. This precision transformed human life, not just across years, but minute by minute. Historians like Lewis Mumford have called the mechanical clock, quote, the key machine of the modern industrial age, end quote. In Technics and Civilization, written in 1934, Mumford wrote, quote, the clock dissociated time from human events and helped create the belief in an independent world of mathematically measurable sequences, end quote. Together, clock and calendar time became the invisible operating system that organizes modern civilization. I'll provide some examples to make the point. No doubt you'll be able to think of many more. Consider transportation systems. For instance, railways. Before standardized time, each town kept local sun time. The result? Chaos for train schedules. In 1847, British Railways adopted the railway time, creating synchronized clocks across regions. And buses and subways? Urban life depends on knowing that the 742 bus comes precisely before the 748 express. Subways move millions each day because riders trust minute-by-minute schedules. And air travel? Aviation requires timed departures and arrivals, air traffic coordination, and interconnected flights across continents. Consider economic coordination. Workplaces demand precise work times. Markets, including stock exchanges, open and close at exact times across time zones. And services require appointments, for instance, for doctors, hairdressers, and auto repairs. Consider healthcare systems. Hospitals run on tightly scheduled rounds and surgeries. Pharmacies promise prescriptions ready in 15 minutes. Emergency rooms triage patients based on critical time measurements. Without precise time, modern healthcare would descend into chaos. Consider education. School starts at a particular time and divides days into measured periods. Exams begin and end to the minute. Coordinated schedules ensure thousands of students enter and leave safely. Consider everyday social life. Dinner reservations at 7:30 p.m., movie show times listed to the minute, gym classes starting precisely at 6 a.m. We could also consider examples in terms of broadcast media, science and technology, legal and governmental systems. Clock and calendar time allow humans, most of whom don't even know each other, to function as a single coordinated organism. Without them, trains would collide, businesses would crumble, and daily life would become chaotic. Historians and philosophers agree. Time discipline was not just a technological shift. It was the architecture that built modern civilization. And yet, there is another side to it. This triumph comes at a cost. While the clock and calendar helped build the modern world, they often demand we override natural rhythms of life, the rhythms written into our biology. For billions of years, long before we invented clocks, calendars, or civilization, life evolved in rhythm with the cosmos, in alignment with celestial time. The rotation of the earth creates the cycle of day and night, a rhythm that shapes the life and behavior of virtually every organism on the planet. The tilt of the Earth's axis as it orbits the sun produces the seasons, bringing cycles of warmth and cold, light and darkness, abundance and scarcity. The lunar cycle affects tides, which for countless species determine feeding, mating, and migration patterns. These cosmic movements establish the original clock and calendar of life. From the simplest bacteria to the most complex mammals, life has moved in a dance with celestial rhythms. For instance, circadian rhythms sync living creatures to the 24-hour day-night cycle. Infradian rhythms track longer cycles like lunar phases or seasonal changes. And ultradian rhythms govern shorter fluctuations such as cycles of feeding, rest, and alertness. These rhythms evolved because they provided survival advantages, and early humans lived entirely within these natural rhythms. Daylight dictated activity. People rose with the sun and rested when darkness fell. Seasons shaped survival. Animal migrations guided hunting. Spring brought new plant growth for gathering. Winter demanded shelter and conservation. Lunar cycles also influenced behavior. Coastal communities timed fishing and shellfish harvesting to tides governed by the moon. Agriculture emerged from seasonal rhythms. The first farmers watched the skies to know when to plant or harvest, and human cultures wove rituals, festivals, mythologies, and calendars into these cycles. For our ancestors, time was not abstract. It was rooted in the natural world and given embodied expression through cultural practices. The original purpose of all early timekeeping for humans, like calendars and astronomical observations, was to better predict and align with nature's cycles. Early calendars were attempts to keep human life synchronized with natural events like the flooding of rivers such as the Nile, the migration of animals, and the growing season for crops. Timekeeping arose as a tool in service of life's rhythms. But with the rise of mechanical clocks, industrial schedules, and global commerce, humans began to impose artificial rhythms on life, regardless of natural cycles. We work under electric lights long after the sun is set. We demand the same pace in the dark of December as in the light of June. We eat strawberries in the winter, ignoring seasonal availability. Our children are woken for school before dawn, even when their bodies crave more sleep. Modern civilization increasingly runs on clock time rather than cosmic and biological time. While clocks and calendars allowed humanity to coordinate and build great civilizations, they also pulled us away from the very rhythms that shaped life itself. And this disconnection comes with a price. Our training to live by the clock begins early, sometimes in the cradle. Modern parenting advice often promotes strict schedules for infants, feeding at exact intervals, prescribed nap times, and bedtimes measured to the minute. Popular authors like Gina Ford advocate routines designed to give parents predictability and control. In her book, The Contented Little Baby, she writes, "Babies are contented when they know what's coming next." There's no doubt that routines can help exhausted parents find their footing. Predictability can bring a sense of order to the chaos of new parenthood. But human infants have their own internal clocks. Newborns arrive with ultradian rhythms, short, irregular cycles of sleeping and waking, feeding and digesting, alertness and fussiness. These rhythms are biologically driven, often shifting hour by hour, especially in the early weeks and months. Some researchers caution that rigid schedules may carry costs for developing infants. And here's why. Babies communicate their needs through crying, rooting, sucking, and restlessness. Responsive caregiving, feeding when hungry, soothing when distressed, helps infants learn trust, that the world is safe and that caregivers will respond. And this establishes emotional security, which is a foundation for future relationships. Strict schedules risk delaying or ignoring infant cues in the name of sticking to the clock. Over time, this may erode an infant's sense of trust and security. Responsive parenting supports a baby's interoceptive awareness of bodily signals. Infants are born wired to listen to their bodies in terms of hunger, fullness, sleepiness, and discomfort. Responsive care reinforces this connection. Babies learn to notice and interpret internal bodily signals. They also learn self-regulation, the ability to calm themselves over time, knowing caregivers will help if needed. Rigid schedules can teach infants that bodily cues don't matter. The clock dictates when it's time to eat, sleep, or be awake. Over time, this can weaken a child's relationship with their own body, a disconnection some carry into adulthood. When caregivers respond to cues, babies learn to manage stress. Emotional co-regulation through responsive parenting lays groundwork for lower stress reactivity, better coping with frustration, and stronger resilience. If schedules override responsiveness, babies may experience inconsistent attunement. Parents miss subtle signals because they're focused on the next scheduled feed rather than the baby's real-time needs. I think it's important to understand why these scheduling approaches became so appealing. Modern parents often live in highly structured, clock-driven worlds themselves. They have work schedules, commutes, social obligations, and household responsibilities, not to mention a need for rest and respite. A baby who wakes unpredictably, feeds erratically, and demands constant presence can throw parents' own rhythms into chaos. Strict schedules promise a return to predictability, more sleep, and the space for parents to function in a world run by the clock. It's not just babies being trained for clock time. It's parents struggling to keep themselves synchronized with society's rigid timetable. So it's understandable why scheduled parenting gains popularity, yet it risks teaching a lifelong lesson that the clock knows better than our own bodies. Of course, not all routine is bad. Many babies thrive with gentle, flexible rhythms, but when schedules become rigid, prioritizing the clock over the child, it can sow the seeds for disconnection from bodily signals, difficulty self-regulating emotions, and build a subtle sense that personal needs are less important than external demands. It's society's first lesson in time discipline. It's excellent preparation for life in a clock-regulated world, but perhaps not for a life deeply attuned to one's own body. And it's a lesson repeated powerfully when children enter school. Historian E.P. Thompson, in his book Time, Work Discipline, and Industrial Capitalism, noted how schools arose alongside industrial time discipline. He wrote, "The schoolroom became the workshop of disciplined time consciousness." End quote. Early school start times, especially for teenagers, clash with adolescent biology. As sleep scientist Mary Karskadon writes in When Worlds Collide, quote, "Adolescents cannot simply choose to go to bed earlier. Their biology doesn't allow it," end quote. This results in sleep-deprived students, lower academic performance, and higher risk of mental health issues. Schools teach punctuality and conformity to clock time, skills needed for modern economies. But they also condition young people to ignore internal rhythms, sometimes at a significant cost. Chronobiologist Till Ronenberg coined the term social jet lag to describe the gap between our biological clocks and our social obligations. In his book, Internal Time, he writes, quote, "We are forcing our body clocks to follow schedules imposed by society, not by the sun," end quote. Millions wake up at 6 a.m. for work or school when their bodies prefer 8 a.m. The result, chronic sleep deprivation, impaired memory and learning, increased risk of obesity and depression. Clock time also demands night work, yet humans are diurnal creatures. Sleep scientist Matthew Walker warns in his book, Why We Sleep, quote, "Night shift workers are constantly battling their biology with dire consequences for their health," end quote. Night shift workers face higher rates of cancer, diabetes, and metabolic disorders, depression, and anxiety. Now let's consider productivity and ultradian rhythms. Modern work divides time into fixed blocks, 15-minute classes, 8-hour shifts, hour-long meetings, but humans don't run on fixed hourly units. Our bodies work in ultradian rhythms, 90 to 100-minute cycles of peak focus followed by dips in energy. Ignoring these rhythms fuels fatigue, burnout, and lower creativity. Beyond physical health, clock time can create existential alienation. Mumford observed, quote, "The clock, moreover, is a piece of power machinery whose product is seconds and minutes. By its essential nature, it dissociates time from human events and helps create the belief in an independent world of mathematically measurable sequences," end quote. Our days become endless lists of appointments and deadlines. We start to measure life not by lived experience, but by the relentless tick of seconds. This alienation can lead to burnout, depression, and a sense that life has become mechanical and joyless. When we talk about biological time, we often focus on circadian rhythms, the daily cycles tied to sunrise and sunset. But life doesn't run only on a 24-hour clock. It also pulses with longer rhythms, the infradian and seasonal cycles shaped by our planet's movement around the sun and the moon's orbit around the Earth. And ignoring these longer rhythms carries costs we rarely consider. Throughout evolutionary history, living creatures synced their lives to seasonal and lunar rhythms. Seasons dictated survival. Animals migrated or hibernated. Plants conserved energy or burst into growth. Humans tracked animal migrations for hunting and relied on seasonal plant availability for gathering. And lunar cycles shape behavior too. Tides driven by the moon determine feeding times for marine life. Even human reproductive patterns show subtle seasonal trends in some regions. Perhaps the most well-known infradian rhythm in humans is the menstrual cycle, averaging about 28 days. Hormonal fluctuations during this cycle can affect mood, influence cognition, and change physical energy levels. Yet modern society demands uniformity every day of the month, ignoring that some phases of the menstrual cycle bring higher energy and social engagement, while others may invite introspection or rest. This disconnect can contribute to increased stress, mood disturbances such as premenstrual dysphoric disorder, and a sense of alienation from one's own body. Menopause is another significant infradian transition that modern life often ignores. As women reach midlife, hormonal changes can disrupt sleep, mood, body temperature, and cognitive focus. Yet, society frequently expects women to maintain the same work pace, social obligations, and emotional availability as if nothing has changed. Ignoring this profound biological shift can lead to unnecessary suffering, fueling fatigue, anxiety, and feelings of alienation from one's own body. Respecting natural transitions like menopause means allowing for flexibility, rest, and understanding, rather than forcing life to proceed as though biological time stands still. Humans are photoperiodic creatures. Our biology responds to the changing length of daylight. In winter, melatonin remains elevated longer, promoting sleepiness, and serotonin drops, impacting mood. Modern life, however, demands identical performance in January and July. Electric light allows us to override nature's seasonal cues. Consequences include seasonal affective disorder, or SAD, which affects 5 to 10% of people in temperate climates. This manifests as depression, fatigue, and social withdrawal in winter. And if we consider the impact on a spectrum, we can also recognize subclinical winter blues, which affects even more people, lowering mood and productivity. As Dr. Thomas Werr writes in Effects of Seasonal Changes in Day Length on Human Neuroendocrine Function, quote, humans remain biologically responsive to seasonal day length despite our technological insulation from natural light cycles, end quote. Metabolic and immune cycles also shift seasonally. Winter promotes fat storage and energy conservation. Summer increases activity levels and vitamin D synthesis. Ignoring these patterns can contribute to weight gain, metabolic syndrome, and immune system dysregulation. Modern life promotes perpetual summer, meaning we eat the same foods year-round and leave little allowance for seasonal rest. Ancient cultures wove seasonal and lunar rhythms into social life. There were festivals at solstices and equinoxes, times of feasting and fasting, and rituals tied to planting and harvest. These cultural rhythms offered psychological relief, legitimizing periods of rest, reflection, and a slower pace. Modern society largely erases these natural pauses. Clock and calendar time press us to maintain constant output, regardless of biological or environmental signals. Yes, modern timekeeping and technology allow us to thrive in all seasons, freeing us from some harsh survival constraints. Yet, in severing ties to natural cycles, we risk flattening life's natural variability. We might ask, what would it mean to live in harmony, not just with the day and night, but with the longer tides of life, the moon, the seasons, and the deeper biological rhythms written into our bodies? On one side, clock and calendar time are miraculous inventions. They built civilization. On the other, as I've described, they demand that we betray the natural rhythms of life. A dialectical view doesn't ask us to reject either side. Instead, it challenges us to integrate them. So what might that look like? First, we could recognize that within the shared framework of fundamental biological rhythms being written into our DNA, there's room for individual variation. Our tendency to biologically align with these rhythms could be seen on a bell curve. This means there are natural outliers. Some people naturally rise with the sun, full of energy, in the early morning. Others come alive in the evening and feel sluggish at dawn. These differences, known as chronotypes, arise from a complex mix of factors. Genetics, variations in certain gene clocks influence whether our internal clocks run slightly faster or slower than 24 hours. Age, teenagers naturally shift toward later sleep times, while older adults often become early risers. Sex hormones, hormonal changes across the lifespan can shift sleep timing and sensitivity to light exposure. Some people's body clocks are highly sensitive to even small changes in daylight or artificial light. And cultural habits, social obligations, work hours, and lifestyle can either reinforce or suppress natural preferences. So while humanity shares biological rhythms as a species, each of us keeps slightly different time. That's why the same rigid clock schedule can feel manageable for one person and deeply exhausting for another. It's not simply laziness or lack of discipline. It's biology. As chronobiologist Till Ronenberg emphasizes in his book Internal Times, quote, there is no such thing as an average human clock, end quote. So we're not all the same. Some are morning larks, others are night owls. So When possible, it's good to align work and study times with your personal rhythms. We could respect our own ultradian rhythms instead of forcing continuous productivity. We could work in focused 90-minute blocks, take 15 to 20-minute breaks, and recognize that rest is not laziness but biological necessity. However, we should recognize that these suggested time blocks might need to be adjusted for individual differences. We could honor seasonal rhythms and adjust workloads and expectations to reflect changing daylight and energy through the year. Beyond what we can do individually, schools and workplaces could have more flexibility in their hours. There could be a delay of school start times for teens, as is recommended actually by the American Academy of Pediatricians. And businesses might allow flexible hours for employees where possible. With the rise of remote work since COVID, lockdown, and so forth, perhaps more people can now manage their work schedules in better alignment with our own chronotype. Chronobiologists universally agree morning sunlight helps anchor our circadian clocks, improving sleep, mood, and health. So, when possible, maybe we could catch a little more morning light. We might ask, what pace of life truly allows humans and the planet to flourish? As David Graeber pointed out in his book, Bullshit Jobs, quote, the ultimate hidden truth of the world is that it is something we make and could just as easily make differently. There's no simple answer for how to make it differently or reconcile clock time with body time, but however we do it, it will be a combination of individual choices and how we collectively organize our institutions and businesses. We can't go back to a world without clocks, but we can remember that we are biological creatures first, and as Mumford warned, not forget that life itself unfolds in organic rhythms, not mechanical ticks. Thanks for watching. May you find moments to step out of clock time and back into life's natural rhythm. And until next time, take care of yourself and each other. Bye for now.